Alright. I think we should be going. I think we're good. Just gonna share this link. Let's see. I think this should be it. Are you sure you want to close this chat window? Yeah, duh. Let's see. Objective. Leave this page. Streaming from VR. Okay. Yeah, I think we're working now. Oh no, Touchdesigner stopped working as soon as I did this. That's hilarious. Alright. Damn. Well, that's a bust. Okay. Sweet, I think good. Just gonna open my research. Woo! Okay. I had this all set up and then my Touchdesigner crashed. But it's okay. It is okay. Okay, let me just check my stream. That should do it. Okay. I think I can start now. Alright, so what you should be seeing, just double check. Yeah. So this is the output from Touchdesigner right now. And I have it hooked up to the HTC Vive, as you may be able to see. Also, because I have the headset on, I can't really see anything that's going on. So actually what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring my screen over to me, and I'm going to turn on this little helper thing. There's my webcam. Keep losing my mouse. Where are you, mouse? There you are. Okay, so I've got my little webcam. I've got a piece of geometry. If I turn it on, there we go. Should just be able to translate it up. There we go. There I am. Look at this. Goofy man. That's pretty funny. Okay, cool. So yeah, the funny thing is I can't really see too much because I'm actually have this headset on. It's kind of freaky. I just wanted to show a couple things I've been working on recently. So the main thing obviously is rendering Touchdesigner through VR, which is actually quite easy. There is a little component that, oh, my tracking is really messed up because I'm right near the edge of the tracking area. But basically there's a little component here under Vive called Simple Renderer, or just Render. And I basically dragged that in here and stripped the scene of everything and brought in, what we have is two cameras, eye left and eye right, and they're rendering and they're compositing to the VR out node, and that's what's going to my headset. So that's pretty cool. It's pretty great being able to use touch with VR. The next thing I did is I used something called, I'm just going to go into my little screen component here. I used something called screen cap or screen grab. Hopefully my microphone works. Use something called screen grab to capture my 4K screen in 9 720p segments because with an educational license of Touchdesigner, you can only capture at 720p. So I captured it 9 times in this little matrix, I guess. Then I shot that out to 720 piece of grid. Used each of those with a constant texture, and textured each of those 9 pieces, and in the end brought them all together to make this screen that I have in front of me, which is pretty funny because it's a 4K screen, but it gets pretty squishy far away. Like that's the full screen. That's what I look at on my desk. But it gets pretty squishy because the resolution of the monitor, or the resolution of the HTC Vive, is 1080 by 1080 pixels, and so there's no way you can see a 4K monitor. So that's why I hooked up. You can't really see it, but I have if I look here, I have a 3D mouse. It's a 3D connection mouse. It's a Space Navigator, and it's a 6-directional mouse. So you have up and down, you have rotate, but I've only mapped up and down, left and right, and everything to, I have to find my microphone again, there it is, up and down everything to the screen. It's just a temporary fix so that I can go closer to things so I can actually see them, because otherwise I can't even use this screen. So I use it to kind of navigate a little bit, like so. What's next? So what else have I done recently that I'm kind of proud of? This VR scene I really like. I really love the feeling of being in 3D space. I made this little plant here, this cute little guy. It's using PBR materials, so they're all using the same environment map, which is determined by this. Where is it? I think it's this. Once again, I cannot read the text because the screen is so large. There it is. It's an environment light comp, or environment light object. Basically, it's one light that affects all the different materials that are PBR, and you can't really tell because I messed with the materials so much and made them very glowy. I'll just get a bit closer right now. Golly. Neato. I'm just going to take my headset off just to make sure the stream is still working so I'm not talking to myself. Let's see. Is the stream still working? Yeah, it is. Cool. That's nice. Okay, so let me continue to show stuff. So the next kind of things that I'm pretty proud of. So I made this little thing. If I were to pick up one of my Vive controllers, which is somewhere on my desk, I just don't know where the fuck it is. Actually, before I do anything else, let me just do something else that's kind of fun. I'm just gonna duplicate. Oh yeah, there's one other thing about this screen that's kind of interesting, and that is that for whatever reason, Touchdesigner does not capture your mouse when you're doing a screen grab. So what I had to do is I made this little sphere here that's on the surface of the screen, and basically it's a piece of geometry. You can see it's just a little, my cursor is a little sphere, and it is bringing in the mouse coordinates, which I think are over here somewhere. Let's see, there we go. I've got a mouse in null, like that. TXTY. I make sure it's in pixels, I believe. Should be in pixels. I'm not sure why it's not. Otherwise. Well, I thought it was in pixels, but I could be wrong. I also might be doing it somewhere else. Let me see. Joystick. Mouse. Oh, I'm doing it inside of here. Okay. So here's my mouse in, and this should be pixels, which it doesn't appear again to be pixels. But I basically take that and I use it to transform a little sphere, which gives me an approximate location of the mouse, but it's not perfect. But the cool thing is that I can actually see my mouse, which means I can work in VR, which is something I couldn't do before. The one thing about it though is that if I were to take my mouse outside of Touchdesigner, it no longer tracks, which sucks because it would be really cool to be able to browse the internet inside of here. But whatever. Okay. So next thing I'm kind of proud of, if I could find, that's right, I was going to try to find my controller on my desk, which I can't do because I can't see, I have my headset on. So I'm going to try to be sneaky about it. I'm just going to make myself another screen, like that. And this is a little video in network that I have. Right now that's capturing my webcam, but I'm going to tell it to capture, instead of my webcam, I'm going to tell it to capture my HTC Vive. That. There we go. Okay, so now I have my helmet cam, which is really trippy, actually. Okay, so I'm just going to take that and apply it to a phone. Come on, touch typing. Come on. I'm going to find the home keys using those little dots. Fong? I think I got it. Nice. Fong. Oh, I didn't even want a Fong. I want a constant. Constant. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to apply that as the emitter of a constant material, and then I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to translate it down. Oh, just lost tracking for a second. That's weird. Anyway, just going to take this little screen and translate it down somewhere that's useful to me. I think my controller is over here in the room, so I'm just going to try to place it over here somewhere in anticipation of finding. There you go. Okay, this is going to be weird. I'm going to try to go over from my desk. Try to go over here and find touch. Yes. Got it. Cool. Okay. So I have a little sphere here that I'm tracking to the position of the controller. And here's another cool thing that I did. And this is it's triggering an animation or really anything based on proximity to an object. So if close to the sphere lights up, the way this may seem like really basic, and it may seem like really super, like why would you want to make a sphere? But the cool thing is that it's a button, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take that up there, that camera, and have a button on my desk. Turn the camera on and off. Might even have a button to turn on my desk. I think it would be. Okay, so that's pretty cool. This thing isn't useful to me anymore, so I'm just gonna turn it off. Nice. And then I want to show the last thing. Well, it's not quite the last thing. It's one of the last things. And that is this thing over here, this field. So, this is something that took me a little while. I figured it out with being get that on Friday night. So basically what it is it's a bunch of instances of objects. Trying to drop this thing over here. Okay. So it's a bunch of instances of objects. Which have used it. And each of them orients towards the desk. And I will just really quickly go into that component. back into my main network, and I think that's it. So I'm just really quickly going to take off my headset and then just show really quickly how I did each of those things, and that should be it. Okay. Whew. Okay. And capture device, activate. Here we go. Much better. Having the VR headset on is a bit exhausting. See if anyone's still watching. Not that it's important. I would, even if no one was watching, I would still do this probably. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna really quickly show you how this stuff was done. So the first thing I'll go over really quickly again is the screen. The screen, I just have 9 screen grabs. Each one's limited to 1280 by 720, which conveniently fits into 3860 by 20 or 3840 by 2160 evenly. It's just thirds. So I capture thirds. Oops. And then I pipe those over to these nulls, which are just to make it cleaner. I have a single 1.28 by 0.72 rectangle, which just makes it easier for aspect ratios and everything. Each of the screen grabs going to a constant and then piped into the panel, and the panel is, there's definitely a better way to do this, but transformed 0.28, 0, whatever, 1.28. It's a grid of screens that allows me to see the 4K. The next thing is the proximity trigger. So where is that proximity trigger? I think it's here. Okay. So this is the proximity trigger. So I have one sphere, which is the trigger sphere right here. You can see it's just sitting there. I transformed it to a location that was convenient, and I applied a material to it, a constant. And then I used a SOP2 to convert the surface operator into points, to a chop. I don't actually know if this is necessary, but I did it anyway. So I then used an object chop and set the compute to distance to get the distance between the two XYZ coordinates. So I need 2 SOPs in order to do that. The first SOP is the trigger object, and the second object is the sphere that I constrained to my controller. You can see I'm moving it around right now. So here we have the distance between the 2 objects, and you can see, I don't know if you can see, I'm moving my hand closer and farther, and it's decreasing and increasing the distance. I have a math here. What did I use the math for? I don't think I used the math for anything. I think I just used the math for fun. Then I use this thing called count, and count has a trigger threshold, which I set to 0.25, and basically it will count 1 up each time you pass within that 0.25 distance. And I don't know what this is, I just entered that in. I also told it to, when I go in close, increase the count, and then while it's on, decrease with time. I'm not actually sure if this is working. All I know is that when I pass within 0.25, you can see in the lower right, when I pass within 0.25, it counts to 1, and when I pull away, it goes back to 0. And that's what gives that kind of blowing effect. I added a bit of lag, which just makes everything more pleasant, makes everything kind of smooth. Use some math to add 0.25, because this whole null, this whole value is being piped into my constant's color. So that's why it's gray. And if I get close, it'll go to 1.25, and then when I remove it, it'll go back to gray. I actually did it just with that 0.25, just because if it was black, I couldn't find it. So you can see if I did add 0, then the color value is 0, which makes it really hard to find. And then it goes up to 1. So that's why I did the math. But I could also, there's so many different ways you could do that. I'll just add that 0.25 back. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Just two objects. One object is parented to my controller. The other one is the target object. I use an object chop to find the distance. I use a counter to set a trigger threshold, and when I pass through it to count upwards. And then I have that driving a little thing. But what I think is cool is once I learn logic operators and everything, then I'll be able to say, if this is 1, if you press the button and if it's 1, then do this thing, which I think is pretty cool. Pretty powerful, at least. Okay, so that's the first one. So what's next? Let's do the point field. Why not? So the point field is probably the more complex one, but it's not so bad, actually. What do we got? So let's start with the basic stuff. This is a simple instance, object instancer. So we have our geocomp, which inside of it has the object that we want to instance, and in this case it's just a box that I've scaled really long so it looks like a little pointer. So that's inside of a geocomp, and on this geocomp, an instance I turned on instancing here. And what it wants is a whole bunch of chop information from, it wants some information in order to place and move the instancer. So in this case, I want to instance this over the surface of a piece of geometry. So which piece of geometry will I use? Well, I use the grid. So I took a grid, I divided it 30 times in each axis. I transformed it to where I wanted it to be, and then I put a null because that's good practice, just so I can add stuff later on in between these two. Like say I wanted to, add a noise or something, which I totally could do, but I'm not going to in case it affects performance. Then I use this SOP2 again. So it's just taking all the vertice information, and it is changing it into chop data, into channels. So we get 3 channels. We get the X channel, the Y channel, and the Z channel. And this is just transforms. I've told it to do this here in the rename scope, but this actually comes in by default, I believe. But if you wanted to, I believe that you could put in things like well, that didn't work. Normals? There's some way that you can also get normals and rotations out of this. I don't know how to do it yet. Okay. So what have I got here? Okay, now there's something a little bit more complicated. Let's see if I can figure it out. Okay, I remember this now. Okay, so what we need to do is, it's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Sorry, I'm just experiencing some issues. That's weird. Low output video. Just gonna check my settings really quick. Okay, let's try that. I think that should fix it. Okay, so back to it. So I have my grid, which it's instanced over, and then I have this box here, and this box is it's parented to my controller. And in order to find a vector, which is an array between 2 points, you simply subtract the x values from each other, the y values from each other, and the z values from each other. And this is something I'm sure I will get corrected on by someone who actually knows math. But with that in mind, and all I did is I looked up vector math in Google. With that in mind, I just have two things. I've got a grid, I've got a box. I've converted them both to point data using the SOP2 chops, and then I used a math subtract node here. So I made the combined chops, I set that to subtract. So what it's doing is it's taking the tx from one of them and the tx from the other one and subtracting the two. ty minus ty, tz minus tz. And it's then outputting that and merging it back into my original data set as tx1, ty1, and tz1. So each of these represents the direction from each point towards my controller, essentially, as I understand it. So I put that to a null, And then when I go back to my geo and it's looking for an instance chop data, I just drag that null onto here. And it wouldn't work quite yet because you have to tell it where to pick up the information from. So it's asking, how do I apply the X transform to these instances? How do I apply the Y transform to these instances? How do I apply the Z transform to these instances? So I'm just telling it which channel to look at. If I were to say, this would still work if I said TX to TY, TY to TX, whatever. It just wouldn't be, it would be mapping one dimension onto another, which isn't useful in this case. So TX, TY, TZ. And then I have to go into instance 2 to get to rotate to vector. And that's the magic part for this pointing to instancer thing, is it's taking my TX1, my TY1, my TZ1, which are vectors that I calculated with this math node, and it's taking that and it's rotating those to the vector. I hope that made sense. If not, my apologies. So one last thing, how did I parent this this box to my controller? Very easy. I have my OpenVR node, which has the XYZ information of my controller. I passed it through a lag because it's more fun and interesting. I gave it a spring so that it, lags even more and kind of jiggles back and forth. And then I put on, and I use the select here to select out only TX, TY, TZ. And then I exported each of these channels to the transform. And export is easy. You just have to click on this little corner button, wait for it to be highlighted green, and then drag up to the box. Export chop. Simple as that. All right. So enough of that one. What's next? Nothing too interesting going on with the rest of the stuff. Here's a plant that I imported from a model that was given to me by Dean. It's just a FBX with a bunch of different parts, and I applied different PBRs with different ramps. I'm kind of using PBRs incorrectly because the whole idea of a PBR is to have a physically accurate material. And, well, I'm not really doing things physically accurately. But one cool thing about this is that, as I said before, if you have an environment light, then it changes all these materials at once using that environment light. So here's my environment light here. And the funny thing I'm doing, which isn't working right now because I turned this off, but I'm taking my webcam and using that as environment light, which means that when I move around like this, back and forth, it does change the lighting in the scene. In fact, I could prove that by taking my HTC Vive camera and attaching that to the environment. And then when I move this camera around, you can see that the lighting on the desk, if you're looking at this little box, you can see the lighting on the desk changes. Like if I put my hand in front of it, it's bright, take it away, it gets dark. I did it really just, whoa! I did that just to really test the environment light and also to make it a bit more dynamic so that when you move your head, it's also changing the light in the scene. But, lots of different things you could do with that. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to show. This is my VR scene. I'm just gonna show once again my screen. My screen with I'm frozen up there. Hello. I move my screen with a joystick that I have on my desk. It's a space navigator. Get in really close. And there's like an infinite. Here we go. That's a good place to end. Too trippy. Alright, let me just show one more thing, if I could, just for fun. So, MIDI mapping. Save and quit. got a little VJ show on Friday, playing for some peeps called Subversive. Anyway, all I'm doing is I'm setting up my MIDI controllers, which I'm showing right now. There we go. Setting up my MIDI controllers to... I basically want to be able to access them more easily. They're great, and they work really well with Touchdesigner, but it leaves something to be desired. So I basically just want increased readability. And the way they would suggest that you do it is that you go through the dialog, the MIDI mapper device, mapper, and then you go and you set up a custom mapping and do it all in this rollout, which I don't really like, to be honest, just because it means that it saves the MIDI as a separate file that you have to keep track of, and I could be wrong there. Also, I just don't find this interface very appealing, to be honest. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to bring in my MIDI controller data, which looks like this. It's kind of ugly. It's like I've got a couple knobs here. Which knob is it? Is it CH1 control 22 or was it 3023? And sometimes they're non-linear too. Like the ones next to each other don't have sequential numbers, which is whatever. So here's what I'm doing. I'm trying to make it into this kind of intuitive MIDI interface. So I got my two controllers here. The top one is all my sliders and my knobs, and even some of the physical features of I would like to represent some of the physical features of the MIDI controller here as well, just so it's easier for me to find, like that. And then down here I have my pads, so you can see. Are the pads working? Oh, I broke the pads somehow. That's okay. I'll fix it while we're on here. Okay, so what am I doing here? So the first thing I do is I have all my MIDI information coming in this ugly way. I'm doing math to map it from 0 to 127, which is the default range for MIDI controllers, to 0 to 1. It's like normalizing it. It's just to make it easier to work with. And then I split it out into two selects. And these select chops are so powerful, they're amazing. So the first one, out of all this junk here, selects all channels named CH1 control, and it only selects the ones 17 through 24, which I have identified as my knobs. It then takes those and it renames them from anything beginning here. The star is a wild card, which means anything goes beyond there. So it renames from this plus anything to knob 1 through 8. So it takes these ugly names and it gives me knob 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is so much better than control whatever. And then I drop them out over here. I select each one with a wildcard 1, wildcard 2, wildcard 3, wildcard 4. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. I hope someone can tell me a better way, actually. So it selects each of these and then puts them to a null, like that. And I'm not quite sure where to go with this. I think I might merge them all back together. But the reason I even added this space is because in some cases, like with these knobs, I'll want to insert things like, you know, a spring. Maybe I'll want to insert a spring here so that when I increase the value, it kind of bounces. Or maybe I'll want to include a lag, another lag, or something like that. So it's just to give me flexibility. The one thing I'm not sure is if I should merge them all back together so I can send them out to another part of the comp or not. So I'm just going to quickly figure this out because it's broken. So let's do this. So here's my controller, 38, 40, 42, CH1N. So then I have a rename. This is an older version, so it's kind of junky. Takes all the channels and renames them from CH1N or to B, and then it goes out here. So, oh, I know why. I hit the scene button. There's 4 different scenes, which cycles through the MIDI channel numbers. Anyway, what do I want to do? Well, I want to only grab the top row. And so let's see, the top row is 38, 40, 42. So it goes between 38 and 52 in increments of 2. This is actually a good thing to test. So I'm going to drop in a select, like so. Okay. I'm going to select channels named ch1. Oh, did I named them already. So I'm actually just going to do this. This is kind of sloppy, sorry. Okay, I'm not going to rename them. So I'm going to take the channels, ch1n, I'll do 38 through 52, increments of 2, close brackets. That should work. Would you look at that? Amazing. So now I only have 38 through 52, and it's only doing every other one, which is amazing. So happy. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to rename them from ch1n star to pad. Make them 1 through 8. Boom. Amazing. I just took it from that crappy naming and made it something nice. Okay, I'm going to do the same except with the bottom. So the bottom is 37 through 51. That was kind of predictable. 7 through 51, increments of 2. Add, let's see, should be 9 through 16. I almost want to do like 1 through 8, but upper pad versus bottom pad. Or maybe that's dumb. I'm not sure. I can fix it later. Okay, so I'm going to rename these to B pad, which means bottom pad, and these ones to T pad, which means top pad. And this is so dumb. It's going to be really dumb. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So let's fix these now. So these are all selects that are and I previously did all the renaming here, which is the dumbest idea ever. So instead I'm just going to use wildcards to wildcard 1, card 2, wildcard 3, and the wildcard just means anything can happen as long as it ends with a 4. So if I had multiple channels that ended with a 5, then it would select multiple channels.
Not necessarily what the music's about, but do you like having to explain about yourselves then, or do you find it a pain?
Each. Okay.
There's a pain. Yeah.
Fix this really quick. I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but you know what? I can't be fucked. So that's kind of crude. 3, 4, 14. You know, if Matthew Regan were watching right now, Matthew Regan's one of the, I think he's on the team, the Touchdesigner team. He might even be the creator of the program. I have to do some more research on that guy. He's a stand-up fella, but if he were watching right now, I'm sure he would give me some Python script to automatically generate all these, or he would cajole me for not using the built-in whatever. Okay, so anyway, it's all fixed. So the next thing I'm going to do, but not in this stream, is I'm going to, wait a second, it's not fixed. What's going on here? Oh, I didn't connect these like that. There we go. The next thing I want to do is, I have like a scene button on this pad, which I was using earlier and kind of messed me up. It changes the MIDI numbers up and down. So the next thing I want to do is be able to switch between the different scenes. We'll see. So like right now I'm doing that. If I go to scene 2, that's all those. Scene 3 is all those. Scene 4 is all those. So I want to be able to somehow manage that scene switching. But that will be for another time. Cool. Alright, I think we got some good progress there. That was just organizing a couple MIDI controllers in a way that, to be honest, may not be that efficient. But for me, it's partially about learning Touchdesigner, and it's also partially about making things make sense to me visually. Because as soon as it makes sense, then you can actually do things with it. Okay. This has been a 40-minute long stream. Different format than last time. Usually I just ramble but this time I had a goal. I even had a little list. Look at that, Touch VR, interactions with objects, point field orienting, Midi controller, and I got through that list. Excellent. Okay, happy with that. Hope that was useful to people. Hope my sound wasn't messed up. Hope the music wasn't too loud. Anyway, signing out.